is the regular City Commission meeting for the City of Largo for June 2nd, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is our first meeting back here in person, although we are spread out 6 feet apart, and Commissioner Fenger is joining us from home as well. So we're going to start tonight's meeting with an invocation given by Reverend Kathleen Walter from St. John's Episcopal Church, and then please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, staff, and citizens who are present this evening. Let us pray. Dear Lord, all the things going on around us are overwhelming, just overwhelming. Illness is ravaging our world, unemployment at an all-time high, essential workers forced to risk their lives for little pay, first responders and medical staff who are overworked. We are witnessing the breaking down of our systems meant to protect all, unveiling the rampant racism and sexism, failing schools, and the far too many to count who are without food or shelter. We also hear about the increase of domestic abuse, suicide, and addiction in our families and our communities. And of course, we here in Florida worry about the arrival of hurricane season. We need you, Lord God, more than ever. We need you to hear our cries of anger, frustration, anxiety, and fear. We need you to hear our cries for wisdom and for healing. Send your spirit of truth. Send your spirit of peace. Send your spirit of healing upon all who are in need. We pray for those who are suffering from COVID-19, especially the families and friends of the 106,000 Americans who have died so far from this disease. We pray for the family of George Floyd and for the terrible pain that is being felt throughout our country because of racial injustice. And especially this night, as we gather for a City Commission meeting, we pray for all who are in leadership positions in these difficult days. Send your spirit this night to be present, so to guide and inspire the leaders of the City of Largo who are gathered here. Their leadership has never been more needed for our immediate community. Bless also and strengthen all the citizens of our great city and all of our citizens throughout the country, that we may come together for the good of all. Yes, Lord, these are overwhelming times, but you are our refuge, our strength, and our hope. With your help, may we all recognize that if we work together, this world will be a better place for all your children, and that there can be liberty and justice for all. In your most holy name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend. The first item on the agenda this evening is a Pride Month proclamation.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Whereas much of the City of Largo's successes and strengths can be attributed to the diversity of individuals and perspectives that are represented within the city's population of over 84,000 residents, and whereas the month of June is designated in many communities across the United States as Pride Month, to both acknowledge the history of prejudice and discrimination toward lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and non-binary individuals, and as an opportunity to celebrate the advancements of the human rights movement and the LGBTQ+ rights movement, and whereas the term pride signifies promoting the increased visibility, self-affirmation, and dignity of this population and emphasizes pride in contrast to shame and social stigma that continue to be felt by many in our society, particularly youth, and whereas LGBTQ+ Americans have made important and lasting contributions in all aspects of society from science to the arts, in addition to promoting equal rights for all regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, and whereas the City of Largo prohibits discrimination in the workplace and supports a community in which all residents are treated with dignity and respect, now therefore I, Woody Brown, Mayor of the City of Largo, Florida, and on behalf of the City Commission, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2020 to be Pride Month in the City of Largo, and encourage all residents to continue to grow with us in our recognition, understanding, and celebration of diversity, build connections with one another, and live up to the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice.
Thank you.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. My name is Julianne Perez, and I serve the Largo community as the Community Engagement Administrator. One part of my job that I especially love is the opportunity to celebrate the people of Largo through community recognition efforts, including this evening's Proclamation for Pride Month, recognizing the LGBTQ+ community. During this month, we would normally see large, joyful events across the Tampa Bay area, and while there is still expression of pride across our communities, those large events that so many look forward to connect with one another have been postponed to later in the year, or have transitioned to smaller events or virtual celebrations. While individuals may not be able to participate in these larger in-person events across the region at this time, there are other community engagement efforts that we can participate in. I'd like to emphasize the definition of pride that was shared in the proclamation this evening. Pride signifies promoting the increased visibility, self-affirmation, and dignity of this population. The City of Largo continues to strive to build an inclusive community that celebrates diversity, and we invite residents to join with us this month in recognizing Pride Month, whether that is exploring the history and continued growth of the LGBTQ+ rights movement, raising your own rainbow flag for pride, celebrating your loved ones that identify with LGBTQ+ identities, or sharing what you learn with family and friends. To explore these histories through storytelling, the Largo Public Library, which you'll see up on the screen, currently has a beautiful display with several book recommendations for Pride Month. There are audio, hard copy, and films that can be checked out from the library or through our digital services. Additionally, tomorrow, June 3rd at 10 a.m., a small gathering of city staff will participate in a flag-raising ceremony, which we will share on our city's Facebook page during the event. On the screen now is a photo from last year's event without the element of physical distancing. The Pride flag will be displayed on a temporary basis at City Hall in place of the contemporary flag currently that represents Largo's brand. It will be featured next to the United States flag and the state of Florida flag, as shown in the next photo from last year's flag raising. We invite the community to look out for these and other posts from the city and the library, and to share activities with us that may be planned in the community this month. Thank you. Happy Pride Month.
Thank you, Julianne. Next, we have citizens' comment. We have a couple different ways that folks can comment tonight, as we're partially still digital. So I'm going to first ask Courtney if we have any online comment this evening.
We have none.
Thank you. And then I'll ask if there are any cards for speakers today.
I have no cards.
Okay. Moving on, we'll approve tonight's agenda.
I'd like to pull 7, move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I didn't see a response from Fenger. Give me a thumbs up if you could, Commissioner Fenger, or a thumbs down. Very good. Motion passes 7-0. Next is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of May 19th,
So
2020.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Were there any corrections or changes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Could I hear the consent docket, please?
Item 4, authorization to submit a letter of interest to the Florida Department of Transportation for consideration of grant funding. Item 5, acceptance of a permanent utility easement located at 801 Seminole Boulevard. Item 6, approval of a transfer of easement agreement between the City of Largo and Pinellas County. Item 8, authorization to use LifeScan Wellness Centers to provide required annual firefighter medical evaluations, fitness evaluations, and air mask fit testing for fire department personnel in the estimated amount of $71,247. Item 9, resolution number 2262, approving technical revisions to the fiscal year 2016 through 2018 State Housing Initiatives Partnership Local Housing Assistance Plan. Item 10, authorization to purchase 9 replacement vehicles for the Departments of Public Works and Environmental Services from various vendors in accordance with Florida Sheriff's Association, contract number FSA 18-VEH16, and Sourcewell contract number 122017-FSC in the estimated amount of $2,821,674. Item 11, approval of Third Amendment to Professional Service Agreement RFQ number 14-Q-480 with Kimley Horn and Associates Incorporated to complete the approved scope for US 19 Roosevelt Special Area Plan.
You've heard the consent docket. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent docket without commission discussion as outlined in the commission packets.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item number 7, Commissioner Holmes.
Thank you. Matt, got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
The way this thing reads is just a tad confusing. It says, each year, as part of the budget process, fire department evaluates the need for firefighter protective clothing and equipment, bunker gear. Okay, so you're evaluating it every year. Bunker gear is evaluated on a standard replacement factor of usage, age, and cost considerations, is also given to the fire service standards for establishment by the National Fire Protection Association. Okay, that's no big deal. In fiscal year 2020, the budget includes $107,500 for bunker gear replacement. Here's where this gets confusing. If you're evaluating it every year, which is good, it says the Fire Rescue Department requires authorization to purchase 45 sets of global brand bunker gear to replace personal protective equipment that has reached the end of its 10-year scheduled life cycle. This is where this gets screwy. We're evaluating it every year, fine, but we're only buying 45 sets, which is roughly a third of the personnel, give or take.
Roughly, yes.
Okay. I mean, I think I kind of figured this thing out, that you have each one of them on a 10-year cycle, but you only evaluate 1/3 of them I guess you'd have to start it in the 7th year?
No, so we evaluate it every year, and what we're evaluating, so 10 years is the maximum allowed by standard, by the NFPA standard that it can be used. Once it reaches 10 years since its date of manufacture, it has to be retired. So every year we take a look at how many sets we plan to retire every year, and this year, between either retirements or failures during annual inspection, that number was around 45 sets.
Okay. Oh, okay. The bunker gear then, that does not count the boots, the helmets, or the shields, correct? Or gloves?
This item specifically does not. This item is the coat and pants.
Coat and
garments.
pants.
Yes, sir.
So I'm doing the math in my head. These things are roughly $1,000 a piece then.
Yes, to be more
Give or take.
specific, a pant and coat set is $2,336.
I missed it by $1.50.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, I think next time around, I want to clarify this thing just a little bit where, I mean, I was sitting there playing with the figures and I thought, well, okay, I think I know what that is. Okay, I have no further questions on it.
We'll try to clean that up. I apologize.
Not a problem.
It's not uncommon that bunker gear doesn't make it entirely to 10 years, is that correct?
It's
It
not
failed?
uncommon, no, sir.
Okay,
It's
that's fine.
sometimes through, just depending on the use, wear and tear, and cleaning and maintenance, it can fall short of that 10-year mark, yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I got one more question. I was pedaling by Station 39 a couple months ago, and there was a tractor trailer out there, and it was some type of laundromat that they had going, and I went, what in the world is that?
Yes, sir. That's the third-party vendor we use to do the annual advanced inspection that's required by NFPA standard, and they also do an advanced cleaning that's also required by NFPA standard.
How often do they have to go through this cleaning process?
That type of cleaning and inspection is just once a year, annually.
Okay, what about after a fire and they come out stinking like?
Then we do what's referred to by that standard as a routine cleaning, and that's done there at Station 39 as well, or by the crews at their own stations.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I move to approve the purchase of replacement firefighter protective equipment in accordance with Lake County Contract Number 17-0606L in the amount of $105,103.80.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
One other thing I forgot. Congratulations to Lieutenant Gary Glenn as Pinellas County's Paramedic of the Year.
Thank you. If just also kind of a procedural thing, I don't think Commissioner Smith nor Commissioner Finger have a button to press, so if you have something to say, just a finger and I'll know to call on you, so that I don't skip somebody. Yeah, that'll work too. Next up is item number 12. I should have given you more time. Next up is the next item.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. I'm excited to be here during this alternate mode tonight once again. Our item tonight we're bringing before you is an amendment to the Citizen Participation Plan. This is a document that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requires of all jurisdictions that receive federal funding through the entitlement programs. And it basically outlines how you're going to involve citizens in the process to develop your annual action plans, your 5-year plans, and also how to amend such plans. So as part of that, we are required to hold a public hearing and have a public comment period even to amend that citizen participation plan. So we have advertised this amendment tonight, and what we're bringing forward to you is some guidelines that HUD has allowed us to add into these plans in the event of disaster declarations like we've been going through. So it incorporates a shortened public comment period from 30 days down to a minimum of 5 days if there's an urgent need to amend such plans and so forth. It also allows for virtual meetings if the case arises versus in-person public hearings, as long as there's still the accommodation to receive public comment real time during it, which the city's done a fabulous job during all of these meetings for that. Also, it indicates in our plan that we typically advertise at the library and city hall when we have amendments or plans available for review, and those facilities have been closed up till this point as well. So we are incorporating language into this plan. In the event of a disaster declaration, that information would still be provided to citizens on our website if those facilities are closed. And likewise, too, for public records, it indicates when city hall hours are typically open for those, and so also noting in there that during disaster declarations, those may be unavailable as well. There was also one housekeeping amendment we added in there. There's an item called the assessment to of fair housing. And HUD actually put a indefinite suspension on that process for jurisdictions. And so we had the whole citizen participation process outlined in there. We just added a comment to it that said that's indefinitely suspended. However, if they lift that, this is the process where we'd involve citizens in that. So those are the main amendments. We did bring this to the Community Development Advisory Board on May 18th. That is also part of our citizen citizen participation plan to involve them in our processes. They did recommend these changes, but they also requested an addition for other methods for outreach. They would like to see public comment periods and public hearings for the items in this citizen participation plan also be advertised on LTV, on the slides, as well as social media. So we have added that as an alternate motion if you wish to incorporate those two items as recommendations as well. With that, I'm happy to take questions.
Resolution number 2267, a resolution of the City of Largo, Florida, amending the Citizen Participation Plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program to incorporate alternative minimum public notice and public meeting requirements and availability of documents and records during disaster or emergency declaration events, authorizing the submittal of this resolution to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, parentheses HUD, and providing an effective date.
Appropriately, I'd like to open it up for public comment. Is there any cards this evening?
I have no cards.
And do we have any comment online? Courtney?
We do not.
All right. With that, Courtney, if you could, if something comes in, please just let us know. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Holmes.
Arrow, I was reading through this alternate motion, and I started doing a head scratch on it. It says, I move to approve the resolution 2267 with the incorporation of the recommendations from the Community Redevelopment Advisory Board. Well, there's no problem with incorporating the recommendations. And even as far as going out in the social media and Largo TV, I was kind of surprised. I thought we did that already.
So the items that we have in that citizen participation plan are basically the bare minimum that has to be the minimum requirements, but we typically advertise in other methods. For example, on our public comment period too, so I posted on the Housing Division's website, but we also have it in the public notices section as well. And we typically advertise out to different agencies and so forth. But we haven't necessarily posted them on Facebook to this point. I think with everything that's gone on virtually, it's kind of opened some eyes too of some other methods that we can add to that. So we do advertise some of our programs on Facebook and other social media, but we have not typically put our public comment period notices for these on there in the past.
Oh, okay.
Same with Largo TV.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Harold, how many do we normally get comments the previous way?
We typically do not receive any comments, and in fact, on this one too, it was advertised for more than the minimum 5 days on this, up to the 12 days, but we have not received any comments at this point. So. They're not typically super controversial, but we do welcome the input, and that is a big reason why we have that advisory board as a function of that citizen participation plan. Many jurisdictions don't have that layer in there, but that is always that check-in with our residents through there at minimum that we are hearing from that group on a regular basis on their feedback.
And I think this is what we're looking for, more of a community engagement, so I think this would be a great opportunity if Commissioner Holmes wants to entertain it.
I move to approve resolution number 2267 with the incorporation of the recommendations from the Community Development Advisory Board to add requirements that public notice be advertised on social media and Largo TV.
Second.
I did have another question from Commissioner Carroll.
Actually, I agree with what's been said so far, Earl. I just want to always ask staff, is there a downside to the recommendation? And is it something you mentioned you're already doing this anyway, but it doesn't, this recommendation or adopting it doesn't generate a lot more work for your...
I don't think it will be a lot more work. The Facebook posts typically do have a slight cost to them depending on how many hits and so forth. We do budget for advertising for public involvement activities for CDBG specifically. So I think we can accommodate that cost, and I don't expect it to be a tremendous amount of extra effort.
I just want to ask the question. I think more is better. The more information we get out there is great. I just don't want to overburden existing staff. So thank you.
I appreciate you asking.
Thank you. I do have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Categories. Feed the cat.
Next up is item number 13.
That's me again. So this item we're bringing before you tonight, there's a whole series of different processes with receiving our federal grant money from the CARES Act. This City of Largo was fortunate to receive additional funding through its Community Development Block Grant Program through the entitlement for it in the amount of $328,370. As part of that first step, HUD issued a memo back at the beginning of April that said we'd like our jurisdictions to go ahead and do what's called a substantial amendment to their annual action plan to incorporate these funds. And then as additional federal guidelines come out about the do's and don'ts of it, then we'll probably go back at a later date and we'll be adding more details specifically on how we ultimately use those funds. So this request tonight is simply to adopt a substantial amendment to the 2019-2020 CDBG action plan to incorporate those funds into the plan. We have put them into a disaster project that we already had listed in there for such events. We do plan to bring an item to the August work session to the City Commission to get additional direction on how you all would like to utilize those funds. We'll be bringing some different ideas. The money does need to be used toward response and recovery for COVID-19. So we'll be bringing that at a later date. So this is simply requesting that amendment to incorporate these funds.
Resolution number 2264, a resolution of the City of Largo, Florida, approving a substantial amendment to the 2019 through 2020 Annual Action Plan for the City of Largo Community Development Block Grant, parentheses CDBG program, to incorporate CARES Act CDBG funding, parentheses CDBG-CV, in the amount of $328,370 and remove the public services cap, authorizing the submittal of the substantial amendment to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, parentheses HUD, authorizing the city manager or his designee to accept said grant upon approval by HUD, providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Do we have any cards for public input on this?
I have no cards.
And any online public input?
Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission?
I move to approve resolution number 2264.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next is ordinance number 2020-27 on first reading. Annexation.
I wanted to make sure I followed the path correctly. Good evening. Ordinance 2020-27 is a first reading for the annexation of 6 properties located on the east side of U.S. Highway 19 North, south of Haynes Bayshore Road, and north of Whitney Road. The 6 properties total 16.78 acres and have a land use of commercial general, residential low, and transportation utility. 4 out of the 6 properties have annexation agreements and petitions to annex. Of the 2 properties that do not have petitions, one is a vacant property owned by DL Mortar Company, whom owns the 2 AutoNation parcels adjacent, which are in the city. The second property is a machine shop. 5 of the properties will be included in the new Largo Tri-City District Special Area Plan, with 3 currently being planned for redevelopment. Current taxable value for all properties is a little over $1.5 million. However, this will increase after redevelopment. Brandon or Georgia, if you can please display the maps for me. Thank you. Under Chapter 171 of the state statutes, a municipality is able to annex property that has not signed a petition for annexation, as long as the area does not include any registered electors. More than 50% of the total acreage is owned by persons who have consented to the annexation by submitting a voluntary petition for annexation, and 50% of the total number of parcels are owned by persons who have consented to the annexation by submitting a voluntary petition for annexation. In this situation, we have no registered electors. 57% of the acreage being annexed tonight have petitions for annexation, and 67% of the total parcels have petitions for annexation. All requirements as specified in Chapter 171 of the state statutes have been met, except for the second advertisement, which will be published on Friday, June 5th. All 6 properties are contiguous to the city's municipal boundaries through previous annexations, and together they help to reduce the size of existing enclaves. The ordinance proposes to annex property that is compact, as that term is defined in Chapter 171, and are not enclaves. Therefore, it is staff's opinion that all of the properties may be annexed in accordance with Chapter 171. The Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners and Pinellas County Planning have been noticed and to date have not provided any objections. All city departments reviewed these annexations and indicated services can be provided to the properties. Staff is available for questions.
Ordinance number 2020-27, an ordinance of the City of Largo, Florida, annexing the within described tracts of land located at 16991 and 17101 U.S. Highway 19 North, along with surrounding properties on the east side of U.S. Highway 19 North, south of Haynes Bay Shore Road, and north of Whitney Road, Pinellas County, Florida, and contiguous to the existing city limits of the City of Largo, Florida, with city land use designation of commercial general, residential low, and transportation utility, redefining the corporate boundary of the City of Largo to include said addition according to the provisions of Chapter 171 Florida statutes, providing for severability and providing for an effective date.
Do we have any cards for public input?
I have no cards.
Any public input online?
None.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Holmes.
Isabel, the Duke Energy right-of-way, is that a lake in the middle of that?
It shows it on the GIS map. Sometimes, though, the GIS can be right or wrong, so I'm not sure if it is a true lake there.
Retention pond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I move to approve ordinance number 2020-27 on first reading and schedule a second reading and public hearing on June 16, 2020.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is item number 15.
Good evening, Mayor, Commission. On May 12th, 2020, the Community Standards Division was contacted via email by Andrew Tess with an offer to settle an existing code enforcement lien. In 2008, the City of Largo began a code enforcement case against Mr. and Mrs. Tess for improper maintenance of their pool. This case was heard by the Code Enforcement Board in 2008, and fines were ran on that case for 374 days before compliance was met. The outstanding fine for this violation was $37,400. A change of ownership occurred on the property in 2009, and the new owners did bring the property into compliance. However, the liens did remain against Mr. and Mrs. Tess. Because the Tesses no longer own the property in question, they are not eligible for any other type of settlement option. The city staff has considered this settlement offer of 5% of their total cost and feel that it is the best interest of all parties to accept. Staff is requesting approval of a code enforcement settlement agreement between the City of Largo and Andrew R. and Amy E. Tess for the amount of $1,870 for an outstanding code enforcement lien that was originally $37,400 assessed against the applicants. And the staff is available for questions.
Thank you. Do we have any cards on this for public input?
I have no cards.
Any online input?
Seeing none.
Thank you. I do have a question. It seems I'm a little unclear on how a code enforcement lien stays with the person and not with the property in this case.
In this case, during the code enforcement case, they also were having financial issues and their bank foreclosed on their property and took the property back. Normally in that case, the city would have been named in that action and our liens would have been wiped out. That did not happen in this case. The bank didn't name the city. So those liens remain on the person up to 20 years and is attached onto them and any real property they might obtain during that time. This came to light for the Tesses when they purchased a new home recently in the city of Clearwater and tried to refinance it, and it was caught by the title search. So it's been sitting out there since 2008 attached onto their name, and it didn't come to light until they tried to refinance.
All right. I think Mr. Zimmett looks like he wants to say something as well.
Maybe I can add a little bit to to that answer. So whenever the Code Enforcement Board finds somebody in violation, it acts similar to like a judgment that would be obtained in circuit court. That judgment applies to any property that the person owns and is collectible against the person as well. So It's just not the property where the violation exists. So if that property is foreclosed upon by the mortgage company, it does away with the lien against that property, the home, but it doesn't do it against any other property they own, and it doesn't wipe out the monetary fine that they owe. So there's a difference between, the lien is just a manner in which you can collect the fine. The fine still exists.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Had seen this type of situation before. but
Yeah, this
thank you
is
for the explanation.
unusual. We haven't had to deal with it at the commission level before.
Yeah, but we just did, we blew away $200,000 at a meeting not long ago. And it was the same thing where these title searches, they didn't pick up the liens that were code enforcement liens that were sitting there. And we're doing a head scratch. Why didn't we work with the homeowner and let them go after the title company and collect the title company's liability insurance? And instead, we just blew the whole thing away. And now here's another one. It's been sitting around for years. And we're taking another $37,000 and just saying, oh, okay, fine. This is almost the same thing.
It wasn't the same thing, though, because the lien was still, the property had changed hands, and the new owners had come to code enforcement, or were gonna come
I think
to
the
code.
thing is, when Alan said it, it was foreclosed.
No, so one of the properties last time, the owner died, and the daughter was obtaining title to the property, through the probate process. It wasn't foreclosed upon, but
Yeah,
the one who
This
had.
one was foreclosed. I
Right,
believe
this
you
one was
said-
foreclosed.
This one was foreclosed. So actually, when it was foreclosed, that would have technically wiped it out. Technically, I think.
It would wipe out the lien on that property only. It does not wipe out the
Not
fine.
on the Tess's, though.
Commissioner Robinson, I believe.
Yeah, I was
I
just
know who
going
you are, but the numbers are.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I mean, this, I understand where Commissioner Holmes is coming from as far as the amount of money that the reduction is, but I know in the previous conversations we've had, the goal of the code enforcement is to bring the property into compliance. I mean, and that fine is a way to try to get people to come into compliance. So obviously these people, these particular people have run into some sort of financial situation. I mean, if their home was foreclosed on, I mean, I don't know that they would have the capability to go back and try to, recoup any of that from.
Again, that happened in 2008.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the property has been in compliance. This thing has been sitting around for 12 years.
Yeah, these
So,
code liens can stay on for up to 20 years.
I think the best thing to do to get this off the top of their heads, it would be to accept this amount of money and move on with it and let them be free of the issue, in my opinion.
Yep, thank you. Commissioner Carroll.
Well, as usual, I agree with Commissioner Robbins.
As usual.
But this is that part of that bigger discussion about periodic reviews by our city staff, legal or code board or whatever, whether it's the length of time or before these fines reach 5 and 6 figures, I mean, it serves no purpose to accrue $1 million fine and then settle for $100. So I'm just wondering what you're going to do going forward, and you really don't have to answer it now, but I just want attention brought to the fact that there should be some mechanism in place for periodic review before these fines languish for years and years, or in this case, decades. And, some homeowner, either the current homeowner or the former homeowner, winds up surprised. So I'm sure you're all over that, right?
We are.
Thank you.
And since we're discussing it, I know that we'll be having a work session on this in the future. There's a community near us that was under some fire for a code enforcement lien that far outweighed the value of the property. So I think that we should perhaps consider a way to not let that happen. I know that there's some things that we do here now that avoids that or helps to avoid that. But maybe a limit based on the value of the property or something that we could consider doing so that doesn't happen now. Our goal, and this, we've talked about this many times, our goal is to get the properties in compliance, and this is just a tool to get us there. But sometimes things are ignored for years, and I'm talking about from the property owner standpoint, so this number gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's just something I think should be in the conversation when we start talking about this at a work session. Any other questions, comments?
I just want to make
Sure.
sure that I got this straight. So that code, that fine actually followed these people past their foreclosure?
It's attached to them.
And the property that they own, or
That they're
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
purchase now?
Well, they've already purchased it. I don't know how they purchased it, if there was a title search or not, I don't know that. They were attempting to do a refinance, because right now is a good time to do a refinance. They were trying to save some money, and when they did the title search, it got caught.
The 37,000?
The 37,000. So they contacted us and asked, what can we do? The property's been sold twice since they owned it in 2008, so they didn't have the option of going to a reduction hearing or anything like that. So the only thing we could do is some type of a settlement.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve authorization for the city manager to accept and sign the settlement agreement between the city of Largo and Andrew R. and Amy E. Tess.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Next is item number 16.
Good evening. This item is for approval of a new sanitary sewer connection for a warehouse located at 4455 Omerton Road. The property is currently on a septic system. The property owner wishes to connect to the city's system but does not wish to annex into the city. Therefore, the new connection requires city commission approval. Staff have reviewed and approved the connection for compliance with current standards and capacity to serve, and can recommend approval for this new connection. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this item.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
I have no cards.
Any online comment?
I'm seeing nothing.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission?
Yeah, Ann, is this one of those 25% surcharges that Kim Adams says is 22% or something like that? I move to approve the provision of provision of sanitary sewer service to Haddock Properties LLC located outside the city limits and within the City of Largo Sanitary Sewer District.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next is item number 17.
Good evening. This item is to request approval of a task order to Kimley Horn under a professional service agreement for planning services to prepare a finding of necessity for expansion of the Clearwater Largo Road Community Redevelopment District. We have been planning for this expansion for some time, had previously done a study in 2016, but were not able to pursue that at that time. We've been going through a 15-year review of our West Bay Drive plan for several years, and this had been placed on hold. During that period, the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners has been substantially revising the criteria under which they will approve expansions of redevelopment districts, new redevelopment districts, and in particular tax increment financing. And it is the city's intent to request the commission issue a resolution of finding of necessity for this area, and ask that the Board of County Commissioners establish a tax increment financing district for the entire Clearwater Largo Road District to provide a dedicated funding mechanism to address the redevelopment needs. We do now know that the West Bay Drive 15-year review is tentatively scheduled for July. And at that point, we would be able to go to the Board of County Commissioners, request the delegation of redevelopment authority, and then prepare a redevelopment plan for your consideration, and then back through the county for approval, along with the request for tax increment financing. So this is the first step in that somewhat lengthy process where Kimley Horn would establish the need for this to become a redevelopment area using both the statutory criteria as well as the guidelines now developed by Pinellas County. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any public input on this?
I have no cards.
Any input online? Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Smith.
Just the county staff has this on their radar a little bit, that we're looking at this?
Yes, we have met with them several times. They have taken a look at the criteria that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners a couple of years ago and said that they felt that this area would meet those criteria for a finding of necessity. So we do have preliminary support from their staff.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Holmes.
Exactly where are you going to expand it to?
I do have a map if Brandon would put that up. I'm glad you asked that question.
Wasn't even a setup.
So the blue area is the current district, and then the kind of hatched area is the proposed expansion area. There you can see a yellow boundary. So within that yellow boundary, that would be the study area. And then the properties that are in the unincorporated area are not hatched. So essentially, it's to take in the Missouri Avenue corridor and take it all the way over to Betty Lane. And then in the lower left corner, there's also a kind of an island between the West Bay Drive District and the current Clearwater Largo Road District that we would be looking at as well. But essentially, this is what's called the North Greenwood Census Tract, which is an area in the county that is a concentration of poverty.
Yeah, are you looking to do annexations in there then?
Yes, in fact, I apologize, this map is a little bit out of date. We have annexed some additional properties, knowing that we wanted to bring this area in.
The former police chief was always commenting about this area where you had jurisdiction issues. There was constant calls there, but it was one of these Abbott and Costello routines, who's on first?
Yeah, we would certainly want to bring as many properties as we could in.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question about, certainly want to look at the opportunity of establishing a TIF for this area. And my only concern is whether or not increasing the geographic boundaries of the area, whether or not it would change the chances of being able to establish a TIF. I'm not familiar enough with that process, but would that have any effect on whether or not we can establish a TIF?
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly the board has criteria that they use, but I'm not aware that the size of it is. It's really more showing the need. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, on that map, which is hard to see now, but very good. The areas on the north side that are still in our planning service boundaries, but not in the city of Largo, if the CRA is established or expanded and then a TIF is established, would it be possible, what's the process to move those properties into the TIF should and when they annex?
I'm not familiar with the process for including them in a tax increment financing district.
Or a CRA.
But with the CRA, we've had that experience before with the current Clearwater Largo Road boundaries. We'd have the finding of necessity. So then we would go in and amend the redevelopment plan and get county approval to.
That's a relatively straightforward process because we're looking at this whole area as a whole.
Right, we've looked at it in advance, but I'd have to do more research on what it would take to include those in the TIF.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, I'm not sure who that is.
That's me.
Looks like Commissioner Robinson.
All right. Hey, Alan, I've got a quick question for you. I live inside this proposed area. Would it create any conflict for me to vote on this? I just want to make sure if I do vote, I don't want to put anybody in any type of.
This study, I don't I don't see how this study could possibly benefit financially or hurt you financially unless you tell me otherwise. So if there's no financial
Not that I'm-
benefit or loss that's possible from the study that's going to be done, then you wouldn't have a conflict that you'd have to refrain from voting.
Wanted to-
And if I could just go back to the mayor's question, so the TIF, if you were to include the additional properties, if you want to include in the TIF, you would amend the plan, and that would have to go to the county for approval. At the same time, we would be adding the properties to the CRA.
Okay.
So, and that's really something we would probably have to negotiate with the county because they're always, resident to at least allow us to use the county portion of the TIF.
Right, understood.
But using the city portion, usually, obviously, they're a little bit more amenable to. But it would be done in the same exact amendment to the plan.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Carol, do we have any voluntary annexation agreements in that area, to your knowledge?
I believe there are a couple. I'll get that information and provide it to you. There are some non-contiguous properties.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I believe there are some, along Betty Lane at least.
Yeah.
I was just going to respond to Commissioner Holmes mentioning the former police chief and reinforce the notion that the only way we can raise the bar in housing up there in that particular area or reduce crime is to have jurisdiction over that particular area, and I see a lot of opportunity there. So, and I think your map is a little dated because I believe there's a development along the railroad tracks on Martin Luther King and Wyatt. I think that is in the city now, right?
Yeah, there's about a 7-acre parcel south of the old church that we annexed in the last year or so.
Personally, I'd like to see that all filled in, all those areas in our jurisdiction. We could do a lot of good up there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve task order number 1 for professional planning services for Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. for the findings of necessity for the Clearwater Largo Road Community Redevelopment District in the amount of $53,500.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Next is item number 18.
This item is the review of the city attorney performance and compensation and approval of the 17th Amendment to the city attorney's agreement. Mr. Zimmett has served through a contractual basis as the city's attorney since June 6 of 2000. A couple of years ago, we added to his contract the services of the assistant city attorney function as well. Staff feels that Mr. Zimmett and his team have performed at an exceptional level during the past year. They continue to provide legal services to the City Commission, to staff, to advisory boards, Planning Board, Code Enforcement Board, et cetera. What this amendment to his agreement provides is for a 4% increase in the retainer, which is the pay increase that we intend on including in the proposed budget for next year for other city employees, and also a $5 per hour increase for legal services that are not covered under the retainer itself. So that's staff's recommendation, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Do we have any public comment?
I have no cards.
Any online public comment? All right, any questions from the commission? Commissioner Carroll.
I just was going to say I've worked with Mr. Zimmett for his entire time here. I'm always impressed with his performance. He represents the city in a number of areas that we don't really evaluate him on. He teaches ethics for the Florida League of Cities and provides other services for surrounding communities, and I really appreciate his hard work. He's the enhancements that have been made to the operation of the staff or assistant city attorney have been remarkable in recent years, the Code Enforcement Board and so forth. So I personally want to just say thank you, Alan.
Any other comments other than to say exactly what he said?
Yeah, he's just sucking up, though.
I've been here the entire 20 years, though.
That's a good point.
I move to approve the 17th Amendment to the City Attorney's Agreement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Did you
Thank you.
bring cake, Alan? No cake?
Not allowed to these days.
That's right.
Sorry, I kept it all for myself.
8 pieces of cake out that are all 6 feet apart. Mr. Zimmett, do you have anything today?
I guess I just want to firstly thank you all for the last action, and while I'm here and got the microphone, thank Nikki Day and Isabella Sobel for, I think they've really brought a lot to the table, and I think as a team we've really gelled and hopefully done a great job for you and all the boards and the staff, and look forward to another year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Holmes.
Again, congratulations to Lieutenant Gary Glenn for being chosen by Pinellas County as the Paramedic of the Year. That's quite a kudo.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson.
I just wanted to say thank you to all the staff that took what I'm assuming is a great deal of time to set this room up as is today, and everybody who's run these meetings virtually over the last month or two. Everything runs together. I don't know how long we were at home, but so yeah, I just really wanted to say thank you to everybody. I know it's been a lot of work. Everybody's put a lot of effort into it, and for everybody who was working constantly during that time, who might not have been at home, but was actually going out and picking up our trash, and the police officers and the firefighters and everybody who was here every single day and doing everything, thank you for continuing to make the city of Largo the community of choice in Tampa Bay. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hulk.
Just ditto on all of that. Thank you, Alan, for another great year. Looking forward to another great year, and thank you also to all of our staff. And Juliana, this last weekend put together a great, helped us participate in a program with Friends of Ridgecrest Park for their graduation. You did a great job. Thank you for that, and including all of us. And thanks again to the city and all the employees and people who have gone out every day and worked and keeping us all together. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carroll.
I was just I mentioned it to the mayor and perhaps the city manager, but my wife and I took the opportunity to drive up to New York City recently and pick up our daughter and rescue her from Manhattan, brought her home. She'll be working from home, but her home is now out by the pool instead of locked down in an apartment in Manhattan. Why I bring that up is I just want to, kind of goes along with what you guys are saying, how fortunate we are to live where we live, because I'll tell you, New York City looked like a science fiction movie when we were there, and many of the states we traveled through were in much worse situations and conditions than we are. So we're very, very fortunate, and we should be thankful for what we have here in Pinellas County, Florida. One other thing I wanted to mention, I really don't want this to be an action item, but just food for thought. Today I was driving on Trotter Road, and Trotter Road, which was obviously one of our projects in recent years, really looks nice. And I'm wondering if there would be a way to put together some sort of an after action or an analysis of what we accomplished down there, because I have to think that the property values along that corridor have increased and the drainage issues have been resolved, and I'm not aware of any concerns or questions coming in from the community about some of the things that people were afraid of, like speeding or crashes or anything like that. So without making a lot of work for anybody, I just wonder if we might take a look at what we were successful with there. We have another similar project up on Rosary, and I kind of like to take a look at success stories and, be able to tell people about them. So just not an action item, no, not a lot of work, just maybe food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
I would like to congratulate all the graduates of 2020. It was a great turnout at the Ridgecrest, and seeing the students and their family was a cool thing, and the joy on their face that they got this opportunity was so nice. And I appreciate our staff for putting that on, and the commissioners for showing up. I'd also like to say, to take what the Reverend said today to heart. We all need to show a little more kindness and love to each other, and open-minded to, we don't understand things, and just create a dialogue with people and respect each other, and to those who are out there protesting, doing it peacefully, I appreciate it, and we appreciate it, and we understand what you're going through, and we thank you, and we thank our staff for all what they do, and I think our citizens really appreciate what they do and keep them safe. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Finger.
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Feed the cat.
Pat's got a couple of words to say. I just wanted to thank all the staff here that has helped us put together these meetings for the last, like Commissioner Robinson said, a month or so, a couple months. It's a challenge, and it's a challenge to do this remotely. So thank you for getting this together here today. And then all the other things that we've done remotely, or the Memorial Day ceremony, and everybody that participated in all that stuff. Secondly, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the stuff that's going on around the country right now. You know, I look at our staff and our police department and our folks here, and I have a lot of confidence in the training that is done with our people here, and nobody's perfect, and we can just strive to be better. And be good people, and that's what this comes down to. So everybody, be nice to folks. And along the same lines, with the COVID-19 issues still going on, not everybody is in the same situation as you are. Not everybody is comfortable going to the grocery store in a mask or not in a mask, or being close to people. So be respectful to people, and everybody's in a different situation. Give people a 6-foot berth, and be nice to people regardless of whether they're wearing a hazmat suit or not. Because we don't know what their situation is, or their level of immune system or whatever. So it just comes down to being nice to people. So I just wanted to mention both of those things. But it is nice to be back, even though we're all 6 feet apart. I think I was just within 2.5 feet because my arms are long. Mr. Schubert, what do you have?
I just have a couple of items this evening. First of all, at the request of one of the commissioners, I just wanted to make a few comments about the readiness of our police department in the light of the unfortunate incidents we've had around the country that evolved from, otherwise peaceful and legal protests regarding the death of George Floyd. I've discussed this with our police chief, and first of all, I'd like to say that, like all of you, I'm very proud of our police department. I can assure you that we have a very highly trained and very professional police department that is prepared to deal with any situations that may arise. They do a lot of intelligence gathering. One of the things they do is stay on top of social media to get a good understanding of what may be planned in the community so that they can be prepared. If called upon, our officers are trained to de-escalate and calm situations. We think that's very important. They're trained to treat all members of the public with dignity and respect. We acknowledge the right of the public to engage in peaceful protests. But I can assure you also that if we are called upon to assist any other local police agencies, that we are prepared to do that. We have not had any requests for that assistance, and hopefully there will not be a need for that. But I just wanted to make those few comments about our police department. I don't know if anyone had any questions at all. But okay, second issue is, every year on the 4th of July, we do a very significant celebration in Largo Central Park, including fireworks. It is attended by many thousands of people. A crowd that it's obviously impossible to socially distance. So in the context of the pandemic, and also in the context of the fact that Our surrounding neighbors are canceling their celebrations, which, if we were to continue ours, would just encourage more people to even come to Largo Central Park, which could create even more of a health hazard situation. I want to go ahead and cancel the 4th of July celebration this year. We do have a contract for fireworks. We have a 50% deposit. We have worked with the vendor, and like all the fireworks vendors, they don't want to, at the end of the day, they don't want a warehouse full of fireworks that they can't sell. So they're willing to work with us so that we can use those fireworks in some other celebration later on in the course of the year, whether it's in conjunction with another holiday, or maybe hopefully we'll be able to reschedule the birthday celebration for Largo Central Park that we had to cancel. So before I cancel that celebration, I just want to make sure the City Commission's on board with that.
Yeah, actually. We don't like it, but we understand.
Yes, okay. I don't like it either. I agree.
We like fireworks.
Yes.
Question. Could we do celebration of independence? Is there a way we can do a call to action to people to maybe do a clean Largo kind of thing? Get out into your community and give back. Something we can do instead of saying cancel, to celebrate America and our independence.
Yeah, we can look into that. We also have some staff that are looking at something maybe virtually. Obviously, we're not going to have virtual fireworks, but something, yeah, something to celebrate the event, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to read, before we adjourn the meeting, I wanted to read, this is from a proclamation that we passed today. I think it's very appropriate. But it's in the proclamation, it says, "We at the City of Largo encourage all residents to continue to grow with us in our recognition, understanding, and celebration of diversity, build connections with one another, and live up to the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice." And that's a great message for today. So meeting is, action items.
I did not record any action items.
Very good. Meeting's adjourned.